Welcome to Systemic Strategy Development Part 2. This is a continuation of Tuesday's session, so that if you missed Tuesday and haven't had a chance to watch the video, today could be somewhat confusing. If you were here on Tuesday and watched the video, today might only be slightly less confusing. We'll see how it turns out. If there are any of you who are in fact new to these sessions, the Systems Thinking World webinars page where you registered for this session, there is a previous webinars segment of this page, and the session from the video for the session from Tuesday is posted there. And if you subscribe to the YouTube channel for Systems Wiki, you'll get announcements about new videos that get posted, and there are, in addition to the web videos for the webinars, there are other videos made about different aspects of systems thinking. There are currently about 150 videos out there at the moment. On the discussions tab of this page, and if you know anybody else that you think might be interested in the content of these webinars, send them a link to this page or to the videos. On the discussions tab for the webinars page, you will find the outline for this session and the other two sessions that are current at the moment. And I encourage you to go to this outline sometime after the session. Don't do it now, because every one of these links, the links that have an IM number after them, are the links directly to the Insight Maker model that I use as part of the presentation, but the links that they are part of actually link to wiki pages that have videos on them with links to the elements that are part of the video and related concepts for that component of what it is that I'm discussing. So there's an enormous amount of support information, more than I can cover in 2 one-hour webinars, but the webinars are meant to be an introduction to the concepts. As I said, the webinars are free. Donations to cover overhead are greatly appreciated. You can donate via PayPal or Google Wallet or send checks directly to Systems Thinking World. It is, in fact, a registered nonprofit organization, so for people in the U.S., donations are tax deductible. As a bit of review for Tuesday, I talked about the concept of a system being anything that maintains its existence through the interaction of its parts and exhibits characteristics that you can't find in any of the elements or components itself. And I talked about the whole idea of the intent from which we pursue things. For a given situation, we want to develop an understanding so we can put together a strategy to improve that situation, and hopefully a strategy that minimizes the unintended consequences that would in fact make that situation worse or create new problems that we or somebody else has to deal with after the fact. It's simply an intent or an attempt to get out of the Pogo scenario, the famous quote by Pogo, who said, "We have met the enemy and he is us." Then talked about the thoughts that systems thinking is a worldview or a discipline, and there are the certain kinds of things that one would do if they are a systems thinker, though my concern about not having a specific approach for going about how to do all of these things, and additionally there being lots of existing models and methods that claim to embrace the systems thinking mindset or paradigm, though there are just too many of them for one to get a handle on, and any one of them is generally not sufficient to pursue something. So I talked about this model that has been developed as a result of those frustrations with what has happened in the past. And on Tuesday, I talked through this in general, and I talked about several components of this specifically in detail, and today that I will go through the rest of the components of this in additional detail. And the first part of this is built upon the systems concept that the events that happen in our life are events that get our attention because we haven't been paying attention to the pattern of behavior that has evolved over time that's responsible for that particular event. And that pattern of behavior that has evolved over time is the result of a set of relations or interactions. The patterns are the emergent characteristics of systems, and those systems are the result of a set of mental models and objectives that have been rules or guidelines that have been put in place by a number of stakeholders who are responsible for creating those structures. So that the whole idea of walking backwards from the situation to understanding the pattern of behavior to understanding the model that's or set of interactions responsible for creating that behavior, and understanding who are the stakeholders that are responsible for the creation of the model that generated the pattern of behavior that is responsible for the situation. And then I talked about the development of boundaries to identify that set of interactions that were responsible, that are part of the model, though which ones of those interactions are the responsibilities of which stakeholders, and all of the interactions together that are to be addressed to deal with the situation, and which things are outside of the boundary, that are part of the environment, that are sort of given that we have to deal with. So today, and this particular model is meant to be an iterative model whereby I could in fact work through all of the steps or segments of this process, essentially doing my homework to better understand all of the aspects of this. Or a couple of people could work together to work through this sequence of things to develop a strategy. Though if I develop the strategy or a couple of people develop the strategy, when they have finished, they essentially have a strategy that they have to convince the stakeholders they should implement to change the model, the pattern of behavior, and the situation. I have come to realize that the best likelihood of getting a strategy implemented is in fact a strategy that's developed by the stakeholders so that they have an ownership for that strategy. Though with the realization that there are in fact situations where there are some stakeholders who could in fact care less about the situation that they have created and are not interested at all in participating in developing a strategy to fix the situation. I pollute the river and make it unusable for all of the people downstream, but I could care less because it's not having an impact on my business, and to clean up the effluent would in fact detract from the profits of the business. Situation that has to be pursued distinctly differently than, well, can be done within this model, though having all of the stakeholders involved is a bit tricky. So let me go ahead and continue from where I left off on Tuesday, where I was in fact ahead of myself, but that's not unusual, I guess. So I talked about assumptions. I talked about, in the context of the model, if we've described the situation itself and evolved an understanding of the patterns of behavior, and we've developed a model that we believe are those interactions that are responsible for that pattern of behavior, and identified who the stakeholders are and how it is that they're involved in creating that set of interactions, The next step is in each one of those steps, there have in fact been a number of assumptions that we have made, some of which are true and probably many of which are in fact not true. From Sengi's The Fifth Discipline field book, there's a concept called the Ladder of Inference, which was initially conceived by Chris Argyris, where observable data and experience leads to a set of data that's selected, and meaning is affixed to that set of data based upon personal and cultural backgrounds, and people then make assumptions based on that meaning, draw conclusions, adopt beliefs about the real world, and then end up taking action on that belief. After pondering the ladder of influence for a period of time, the realization was that it's actually not a ladder at all, and that if we begin with beliefs which influence our actions, and those actions create real data and experience, we then select some of that real data and experience, because it's just not possible to pay attention to everything. So we pick certain stuff to pay attention to. We affix meaning to the data and experience that we've selected. We draw assumptions, make connections, and that is in fact the basis for beliefs, which are the pieces of the ladder of influence, but it is in fact a belief development structure, and it should in fact be a reinforcing structure that leads to our learning, growth, and development, because of the real data and experience that results from our actions should provide us with a basis for new learning and understanding to expand our beliefs. The difficulty is that the beliefs that we have cause us to select that data and experience which is consistent with our beliefs, so that it ends up being a structure which actually limits our growth and development, because we're in fact protecting our beliefs. There's a marvelous article that Argyris wrote about teaching smart people how to learn. It is in fact trying to get beyond our own beliefs that end up being the impediments to our own learning, to ensure that the assumptions that we have in fact made are true and valid, because the likelihood of taking valid actions based on invalid assumptions is just sort of very unlikely. So if I go back to the network magic situation, the boundaries model that I created for the interactions at network magic, this whole example was based upon the claim by support that they were having an amazingly difficult time training and maintaining a support staff to maintain a level of support readiness that they wanted or felt they needed to maintain with an ongoing growing workload, and other organizations claiming that the best place that they could find resources to satisfy their resource needs was to in fact steal them from support. Well, did I in fact validate the growth in the resource loading, the amount of work that has developed over the last couple of years? No. Did I actually investigate the extent to which other organizations claim was in fact true? Were they stealing resources from support just because it was more convenient, or because they actually couldn't find people elsewhere? So that one needs to go back and look at all of the assumptions that are part of the definition of the situation itself, and all of the assumptions that are built based upon what the investigations that follow from that, and say, are they in fact valid? Simply because of what I said about if we move forward to develop a strategy based upon a set of invalid assumptions, the strategy is not likely to accomplish what it is that we're interested in accomplishing. Now, in addition to this point, the next component of the model is to, in fact, investigate our understanding of the set of interactions that are responsible for the situation and figure out where the leverage points are in that structure so that altering the structure will, in fact, change the pattern of behavior and, in fact, create a tomorrow, a future that is actually better than what it was when we started. I talked before about lots of times when we approach problems, what we really set out to do is to just make the problem go away and go back to however it was that things were before the problem arose. Though what is really more beneficial is to figure out how to take that situation and use it as an opportunity to, because we have to do something to address it anyway, to in fact deal with it in such a way that when we finish dealing with it, things are actually better than they were before the situation arose to begin with. There are some things that it's important to understand about the nature of systems, and this concept of dynamic equilibrium, all that whole set of interactions that we identify in the model are in constant flux with each other, and there are reinforcing and balancing feedback structures that exist on an ongoing basis, and I can in fact alter that structure. Hold on. I can in fact alter that structure by applying force to it and actually causing H, the entity H, to move or behave differently. And I can get it to do that for as long as I apply this force to the structure. Though as soon as I stop applying that force, it's going to go back to just the way it was. Because I did not understand what it was that was causing it to be the way that it was, and I never interacted with any of the influences that were causing it to be the way it was. I just took a brute force approach and said, well, it's going to be different. Well, that's one way to approach it, and if you are willing to continue to apply that force to the system endlessly, well, have at it. There are a number of laws about systems which have proven to be true repeatedly. Maybe that's why they got termed as laws. And these particular ones are from a marvelous book by Barry Clemson on cybernetics. And I'm not going to read the detail, but you can read it sometime if you want. Law 1 about self-organizing systems indicates that the way that this system behaves is primarily dependent upon the nature of the balancing and reinforcing feedbacks between the elements. That the system is not in an eternally stable state. It has basins of stability separated by times of instability when it's actually changing, and during that instability it may in fact return to its previous basin of stability, or it could in fact end up in some other basin of stability. And the output of the system is dominated primarily by that set of interactions, that feedback between the elements, and any attempt to alter the system from outside is typically irrelevant, because it is back to the comment that I made here about T modifying the structure. Well, if it can in fact force a change, it will result in a modification, but only as long as that force is applied. For the most part, it is in fact doing what it's doing because of all of the interactions. And any output that this system is intentioned to produce on an ongoing basis will in fact have an associated feedback to the system so that it understands about it. Otherwise, it won't be maintained. That's a sort of involved way of saying what gets measured gets done. And because of that, the complex nature of that set of interactions, any intent to govern the interactions of the system has to be at least as complex as the system itself that it's trying to regulate. Otherwise, it ends up being overwhelmed by the set of balancing and reinforcing influences going on between all of the elements of the system. So from a systems perspective, there was a marvelous paper written by Donella Meadows about a dozen ways that one can approach dealing with a complex system, and she presented those in that paper in such a way that as one migrated from number 12 to number 1, that each approach had the potential for a greater impact on the operation of the system itself, though as you progress from number 12 to number 1, it was more difficult to implement or to cause the system to be different in that way. So the first one being parameters, simply constants or variables within the system that it uses to calculate things, to figure out other things. They're not the kind of thing that is likely to result in lasting alterations in the system. Number 11 being buffers. Now, I will admit to you openly and honestly, I can't remember these 12. Every time I run into a structure that I want to think about, I pull out this list, her paper, and I go through the model that I'm thinking about with this list, and I walk the list and say, okay, where is it in this structure that parameters, altering parameters, could have an impact on the structure, and does it result in the kind of thing that we're trying to accomplish? And the next question is, okay, are there places where we can alter the buffers? Buffers being reservoirs that are used to stabilize changes in things. The reason that we build water reservoirs to provide us with a constant water supply to overcome the difficulties between rainy seasons and dry seasons. So you can alter the size of buffers to try and stabilize the system in a particular way. You can change the way that different buffers are connected so that the flow of things from one place to another is different. You can identify places where there are delays in the communication of information from place to place, so that there may be places where the actions are overreacting because they're not receiving the appropriate information soon enough, because the feedback is in fact being delayed. So finding delays in the system and learning how not to overreact or how to improve the feedback so that the feedback to govern the operation is more current than it was previously. To identify negative or balancing feedback loops in the structure to balance out or slow down processes in certain places. To identify reinforcing structures which have a tendency to speed up processes. To identify where information flows don't exist that ought to exist, so that other places could in fact behave differently based upon the information that they currently don't have. To identify the rules under which the system is operating so that it attempts to operate differently because of the rules that are established. to alter the structure of the system itself so that, and there is a relation between these so that the stock and flow structure and the information flows, the different kinds of things are related, but this is allowing the system itself to evolve based upon the natural balancing and reinforcing structures that already exist, or to alter the goal of the system itself so that the system is attempting to dynamically alter its operation to pursue something different than what it was pursuing before, to alter the mind of the system, the typical paradigm under which the system is operating. And this you'll see when I get into the example for network magic. The way that the elements of the system interact, there is a set of beliefs that govern some of the interactions, and it might be a different set of beliefs which would in fact alter the operation. And the final one is to transcend paradigms, to actually be able to look at the structure from different paradigms to see if there are in fact completely different thoughts about the way that the same system could operate. There is no way that the last 5 minutes have done justice to Donella Meadows' paper. I highly recommend it. It's awesome. But in fact, taking that set of understanding and looking at the structure of the boundary structure for the situation with network magic, and thinking about those 12 different levels of things, what came to mind was, and here, as I said, I end up having to go through this sequence in concert with thinking about the model to figure out where things might be appropriate. And the first thing that comes to mind is that the organization could in fact issue a policy for no resource rating, to tell all of the other organizations that they simply can't hire people from support. That's akin to trying to figure out how to get water to run uphill. Because if they, I mean, it's like passing laws against taking drugs. If they believe that that is in fact the best answer to their situation, they will find a way or make one to continue to acquire these resources. They'll find a way. I mean, they'll get these people to quit, and then they can hire from outside. I mean, and passing this policy for no resource rating is in fact good for the support organization, but it's not good for the rest of the organization. And there was a comment that Russell Ackoff made in a number of his videos. He said something about, you never want to enhance any part of the system unless it also enhances the whole, because you're really just wasting your energy. If you improve some aspect of it that doesn't improve the whole, then the way that it interacts with the environment doesn't change. And you are more likely to find out that enhancing some part of the system and not enhancing the whole actually ends up making the whole situation worse. So that's why that the implementation of a no resource rating policy, it came to mind that enhances support's operation but hinders the rest of the organization. The next thing that came to mind was to migrate to self-service support. That is, for the support organization to create a knowledge base so that customers can in fact look in the knowledge base and find answers to their own problems. That is in fact a mind of the system type of alteration in the operation, because in most support organizations they believe that answering the customer's problems is their responsibility And for the customer to answer their own responsibility is just contrary to their mindset. So that I said that the organization has to let go of the idea that it is solely responsible for providing support. And beyond that, to actually integrate the customer into the support system, which is also a mind of the system type of change, the same kind of thing that the support organization has to let go of. I have seen numerous customers who have a technical awareness and understanding of the products that they use that's almost equivalent to the engineers that develop the products. And they would be more than happy to share their learning with their supplier and the rest of the customers of the company, so that one could integrate the customer's learning into the support organization's learning and share it with everyone to reduce the load on the support organization. They could, in fact, engineer the support requirements out of the products by doing number 6, information flow, for support figuring out which problems are in fact creating the greatest workload for support and funneling that information to engineering so engineering can figure out if they can actually re-engineer something so that that problem never arises again, which has a substantial impact on support's operation. And then another one is to expand support's responsibility, and this is the number 11 buffers. Support could in fact hire more people, so there's an excess resource in support for other organizations to actually read. So support ends up with a dual responsibility, which is changing the rules of the system. So support is responsible for customer support and the existence of qualified resources to, in fact, support the rest of the organization in total. That's a buffers one and a rules of the system one. So those are just some initial things that came to mind based upon going through this structure and the boundary map of the situation as it's unfolding in network magic. It's not to say that these are the right answers are the only answers, though they are in fact a set of answers, a set of actions that were developed based upon an understanding of the structure of the situation itself. So based upon to that point, then one has to figure out, how do you actually put together the strategy? What does the organization actually choose to do? And with the realization that the strategy is in fact a winding trip through a whole bunch of hazards trying to get to a better place. And it's dependent upon the leverage, money, resources, and time frame. The worst possible thing that you can do to an overloaded organization is give it more things to do, because things just get worse. And I've seen it happen I have consulted to organizations and I have worked in organizations where that has repeatedly happened. I mean, the organization is so busy it can't keep track of what time of day it is, and all of a sudden here are 5 new projects the organization is going to pursue. And we've known pretty well since 1975, when Frederick Brooks wrote The Mythical Man Month, that adding additional resources to an overloaded situation only causes it to be overloaded more than it was. There's a fundamental attribution error whereby if in an overloaded situation, that overload tends to degrade the performance of the organization. And because of the performance degradation, management determines that people in the organization need more help, so they implement more accountability and control, and they micromanage the situation, which in fact simply adds to the overload and makes things worse. Back to the pogo scenario about we have met the enemy and he is us just one more time. So that in developing the strategy, one needs to be realistic about, can the organization in fact actually pursue the strategy that you put together? Just simply saying, well, this looks like a good idea, let's do this, is simply not going to get there. But we are the victims of ourselves over and over and over again. So for Network Magic, the scenario that I worked out for them is to go ahead and implement this no resource rating policy. I said that this is good for support, but not good for the rest of the organization. So the intent is not to implement this forever, but to implement this for a period of time to allow support to catch up and provide them with additional funding and headcount so that they can hire additional resources and train them about the company, the customers, and the products, so that we can in fact use those resources in all of the other segments of the strategy that we actually want to implement. So from there, we can then begin to get rid of this no resource rating so other organizations can hire from support and begin to use support's extra resources to expand their responsibility so other people can hire from them, and for them to begin to develop self-help systems for the customers so that customers can begin to solve some of their own problems. Now, in terms of the question is, well, if we hire all of these additional resources, what are we going to do with them after we implement all of these efficiency improvements in the organization? And the point is that the organization is experiencing growth such that it's going to need them tomorrow. The difficulty that the organization is likely to experience is one of growth and underinvestment. Also, in some circles called playing tennis with a wooden racket. That if the organization doesn't in fact front load and develop its resources, it ends up in a predicament where it will never be able to recover from the damage that it has done to itself. People experience this by not developing their support organization early on, and they never recovered from it. They had an endless array of contract help trying to do customer support, and it just never developed the level of support expected by the customers, and the customers just went elsewhere. So, and then from there to migrate the self-service support to then integrating customers into the support system and engineering support requirements out of the products. Not to say that this is the appropriate strategy. It is a strategy, though the strategy ought to be actually developed by all of the stakeholders who have to be involved, so that now that we're talking about specific changes to what's happening with engineering, other organizations has to separate, and engineering specifically has to be involved in figuring out how to do this part of the puzzle, as opposed to support figuring out the answer and trying to sell it to engineering, which is likely to not fly well at all. So what I have done from beginning to end to this point is an example of how I might do my homework to understand all of the segments of the situation, and then actually work with a group of stakeholders and not attempt to tell them about all the homework I did, but use it as a foundation to facilitate them actually arriving at their own approach to dealing with this situation, and not coerce that facilitation based upon the understanding that I developed doing my homework, which is an artful approach, though. And oh, and by the way, I don't do consulting, so this is not a sales pitch. Questions? Boy, there have not been many questions today at all. You people scare me. Maybe I scare myself. Let me close a few of these. So what I have tried to do yesterday, or Tuesday and today, is to provide you with an initial introduction to this model, which is continually evolving. I mean, based upon lots of things that I simply couldn't figure out previously, and being extremely frustrated about not understanding why things didn't work, why we were unable to produce the level of improvements that seemed possible. Where were the holes in the things that we were doing? So I've continued to try and evolve this set of understanding. And here's where I am at the moment, and it's not done. As I interact with numerous people on the Systems Thinking World discussion group, they continue to raise questions and provide new insights into things that need to evolve the model and be integrated, ways to go about doing different things. So this isn't meant to be, hold on, wait a minute. This is not meant to be different than, this is systems thinking. It's not a new method or model or approach. It's an agglomeration of various aspects of a lot of different methods that seem to make sense to go together, as opposed to selling viable systems approach or system dynamics or just soft systems methodology. There are a ton of well-defined methods, though all of the methods run into problems. Oh, Joseph, are there existing examples demonstrating where all of these methods are implemented and commented? Not yet, Joseph. It's still evolving. I have a couple of models that I need to document in the same through this same process. I'm just not there yet. Well, it appears as though I'm going to finish early today. The video for this will be online within a couple hours. As I said, donations are welcome. Tuesday and Thursday of next week, I am doing 2 sessions on. Joseph said, will they become online later? Are you talking about the other things that I'm trying to document? Okay. This systemic perspective segment, this navigation panel on Systems Wiki, systemswiki.org. There's a separate section here called Systemic Perspective. Foundations is, in fact, this model and every one of these represents a video with links to the various pieces that I've talked about. So here's the piece on stakeholders. It's a video. Here are the specific Insight Maker models I used. Related pages. So if you look here, There's modeling, simulation, system archetypes, virtual inquiry. The piece that I haven't quite got figured out yet is, what is this? Oh, the system perspective series itself, the systemic perspective examples. This is where all of those pieces will get documented. So they will, in fact, be online. It's just going to take a while. It goes on and on. To where was I? Oh, next week on Tuesday and Thursday, same time, I will be doing 2 sessions on modeling and simulation with Insight Maker. All of the diagrams that I have used in the webinars are done with an online web-based modeling and simulation environment called Insight Maker, which is free, completely free. Also multi-user, so that multiple people can work on the development of a model. It was initially built as a simulation environment to be able to do system dynamics, causal loop diagram simulations by relaxing some of the rules as to how you connect things together. We found out that we could create a lot of additional models with it. So the session for Tuesday and Thursday next week, this is the equivalent to the foundations piece that I did Tuesday and today. These are all of the videos for Insight Maker. So the sessions that I do Tuesday and Thursday of next week, that's already all online in individual modules, and in the previous webinars segment, this is one that has been done before, so that here are several videos on modeling and simulation with Insight Maker. And before I decided to call this session this week's Strategic Strategy Development, it used to be called Systemic Perspective Foundations, so there are additional webinar videos here. Okay, so if you are interested, please go to this page and register for the sessions next Tuesday and Thursday. If you know other people that might be interested, go ahead and send them this link and tell them that the sessions are next week, Tuesday and Thursday, and they're free. Have a great weekend. Hope you found it meaningful. And if you have questions after the session today, just send me an email. Take care. Bye.